Hey friends, this is day 464 of Russian war against Ukraine, and boy, things are starting to really heat up in many unexpected ways. We're seeing drones over Moscow, we're seeing Russian revolutionaries rise up with arms, we're seeing that the preparation for the big Ukrainian offensive is starting to take shape, and that's all leading somewhere. So we're going to talk about a few things today. Number one, we're going to talk about the nightly attacks on Kyiv, which has been pretty intense, and what that means. We're going to talk about the drones over Moscow the day before yesterday. We're going to talk about the revolutionaries in Russia, which is the Russian Volunteer Corps, RDK, and what they're doing, and we're going to analyze the situation as well. So, but before we begin on the front lines, there's nothing happening. If you're wondering what's happening in Bakhmut and on the Eastern Front, they're just not there. Russians have lost the potential to attack, to advance. They're not moving anywhere. Ukrainians have slowly been surrounding Bakhmut to take it back, but they have slowed down as well. So everything is in it's a pregnant pause, so to say. But what has been happening in Kyiv in the last 4 days is that Russia has been using the cruise missiles Iskander, which is the system that they have to attack Ukraine, to attack Kyiv nightly, so every night, and sometimes during the day as well. And the purpose of that, of course, is to exhaust the people who live in Kyiv, both physically and mentally and emotionally, so that they are ready to give up anything. They're ready to put pressure on the Ukrainian government just to finish the war, just to give in into any demands. Because people have not been able to sleep since most of these attacks are at night. They have had to go to the bomb shelter. The air raid sirens are blaring all the time. I think the day before yesterday, the red alert was for like 5 hours, so people didn't get any sleep. So Russia is trying to do everything to derail or slow down the offensive of Ukrainians that is coming, and they're doing it through cruise missile attacks. In this regard, we have to look at the drone raid that happened in Moscow the day before yesterday. So today is Thursday, so that would have been Tuesday. So 8 to 32, like the really wide range, nobody really knows, of Ukrainian drones had reached Moscow, and their target was this small region, or you could say a village or a suburb of Moscow called Rublyovka, which is where all the power elites would live. So you could think about it as, Park Avenue in New York or Beverly Hills in Los Angeles. But of course, in Russia, the powerful people are not businessmen or actors. They are military leaders and the military-industrial complex directors and stuff like that. So that was their target. Nobody was hurt. There's no casualties. Actually, I think only one drone had hit like a service building, but the reason it hit it is because it was shot down and it sort of diverted off course and hit it. And of course, the point of the raid was not to bomb anything. Like 30 drones is not going to do a lot of damage, but it was mostly symbolic and political for several reasons. It's important not to look at these events as one-offs. 3 weeks ago, one drone hit one of the domes in Kremlin and it did nothing. These drone attacks are doing nothing for the military advance, but of course you have to look at it as a progression of things, as a complex of different events. So drones, you have to look at them with RDK, with the Russian Voluntary Corps as well, and what they're doing, and then it all starts to make sense. And we'll look at that in a minute. But what we're seeing is that this was a symbolic gesture that Ukraine can reach you where you are, and Ukraine is not attacking any peaceful citizens, but specifically people who are responsible for producing or launching weapons of mass destruction against Ukraine. So that was sort of the message. What is interesting, so if the word Rublyovka sounds familiar, it does mean a ruble. It's like the place is for rubles. They even named it again after themselves. What was interesting is that most of the Russian public, they were not against that this happened. They were actually gloating. They were saying, you get what you deserve. You guys, the Russian elites, which is the military leaders and the industrial complex chiefs, you are the ones who brought it on yourselves. It was so bad to the point that one of the propagandists, Solovyov, went on a rant saying, "How could you dare gloat at what happened? This is still Russia. Moscow is still Russia." And so they had to counteract it because people, they didn't care. They said, you started this war, now you're reaping the benefits. So, which was a unexpected reaction. I didn't know that this would happen because a lot of these people are for the war. They're anti-Ukraine, but in terms of the people who started, there's an internal struggle there with the elites themselves. People understand that they're not free, they're not economically prosperous because these people are reaping all the benefits because they're close to Putin, who's lavishing them with finances at the expense of everybody else. So if the drones did not achieve any military goal, why was that? That seems like a stupid waste of time. Could you send them somewhere else? But of course, a couple of things. Number one, you don't look at it as one-time event. You look at it as a series of events that have started in drone attacks that had happened over the last couple of months. I'm not sure how. If you've been following it a little bit more, you can see that these drones are getting closer, have been getting closer and closer to Russia. There is reports and pictures of Ukrainian drones that have been trying to find their route. Some of them were shot down, others hit tops of the trees and shot down. So this has been a progress that's been going on for some time. Plus, you have to look at it as the same direction. As the same strategy as the Russian revolutionaries. These are helping each other's cause. The main thing is that Ukraine is showing the rest of the world that you don't have to be afraid of Russia. Since we've seen and heard many politicians say, well, you really don't want to get in with Russia because it would be devastating for countries. Do we really want a World War III? We're really fearing that Russia is going to use not only their conventional weapons but also the last resort, which is the atomic bomb. And a few things that I see this air raid had achieved. Number one, Kyiv. Ukraine is raising the stakes, saying that you cannot go unpunished just bombing Kyiv and getting away with it. If you're going to bomb Kyiv, you're going to get something in Moscow as well. So before a year and a half that this war has been going on, Russia has been able to bomb our territory, and it cost them nothing apart from the price of the ammo. But now with achieving a parity, like if you're going to hit Kyiv, you're going to get something in Moscow as well. It helps to bring down the escalation, de-escalate the situation, and make these attacks on Kyiv a lot more costly to Russian Federation. Number two, because this has been sort of a path to Moscow, drones have been trying to find routes that are not really protected. Ukraine has been mapping where the anti-aerial systems in Russia are located, so that we can use this information in case the situation escalates and Kyiv needs to send like cruise missiles to Moscow. At this point, it's hard to say if it's going to happen, but the main weapon, as you know, is not the attacks themselves, but the threat of attacks. And that's how, for example, mutually assured destruction works. It's just on threats. That's why no nuclear weapons have been used recently, because if you're going to launch something, then you're going to get something back within 10 to 12 minutes. So that's how it works. Number one, parity. Number two, mapping out where the defense systems are. And number three, it showed the world that Russia is not that protected. If a handful of drones have been able to reach Moscow, it's like 600 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. Which is like 400 miles, you understand that the defenses there are pretty weak. This is a demonstration both to the West and internally to Russian command and to Russian people. And then finally, I think the biggest achievement of this air raid was to show that there is no intent on Russia to unleash nuclear weapons anywhere, because you could argue with strikes on what Russia considers to be their territory. So, for example, Crimea or Donetsk or something like that, that might not have triggered any internal defense doctrine that they have, which says that if there's a strike on Russian territory, then we have the right to use the means of last resort, which is the atomic bomb. But in this case, the strike has been made on Moscow, like the heart of Russia, where everything is happening, where all the decisions are being made, where all the elites and the powerful and the rich are located. And since that happened, Putin's reaction was that, well, this was just Ukraine's response to our bombings, and he says we already responded to them by initially attacking them. So they're not going to do anything about it. And if they were serious and had any intent to use nuclear weapons, then the attack on Moscow directly calls for the protocol to deploy at least tactical nuclear weapons. But as we see, nothing like that happened. So we can put to rest all the conversations, all the fears about what if Russia uses the weapons of mass destruction. Okay? Joe Rogan, I'm talking to you. Gotta stop that. All right. And what's interesting is it's been fun to watch the Russian revolutionaries, Русский добровольческий корпус, the Russian Voluntary Corps. These are people who, or professional soldiers and command. Part of them were taken as prisoners of war in the early months of war with Ukraine. They have been vetted, background checks and everything, and they had made this corps, this little army of people who are against Putin's regime and have actually taken up arms to go and free Russia from Putin's regime. As you remember, last week they had gone into the Belgorod region and they had taken 3 villages. But now, in the last couple of days, they have gone into this little town, Shebekino. You probably have heard this on the news several times, but this is a town of about 40 to 70,000 people at different times. And these revolutionaries have been able to get in there, set fire or attack the police station, and then they actually went into people's houses, talked to them, and as they say, this is not Ukraine, but they say that there have been quite a bit of desire to join them from the Russian side. So we see that there is internally in Russia, there's people who radically oppose Putin's regime and are even able to risk their own lives of their families to take up arms against Ukraine. Of course, this is not a secret that they are using the weapons, the machinery that have been sent to us from the United States. So we can see on the pictures of their invasion, of their freeing of these towns. They're not invading their own country. That they're using at least Humvees and Max Pro. And everybody knows what a Humvee is, but a Max Pro is this huge truck with a transport truck with huge wheels that can go over pretty much any terrain. So, and the scandal, of course, was around how can they use the American machinery to do this? Well, generally speaking, Russia is a legitimate target for Ukraine because Russia had initiated the war. So Ukraine has the ability to either go into Russia to demand capitulation or start advancing that way, which is Ukraine is not going to do, or to supply groups within Russia that are fighting for the same cause as Ukraine in this sense. RDK is by no means a Ukrainian army; they're Russian citizens. But in this case, the aims of the two groups are the same, so they are acting in accord for the same goal. And the only question right now is, has America authorized using these machinery and these weapons for the use of RDK? I don't know, but judging by, well, first of all, they say the White House says we're going to launch an investigation and into seeing how that machinery got in there, because initially, maybe you may remember this. There was a picture of like two Humvees stuck in a ditch that was propagated by Russian mass media, saying, "We'll see that this is the Americans attacking us." But of course, it looks like that the machinery they're showing there has been staged, because those machines have been taken as trophies at the beginning of the war. It was not connected to raid on Russia. And in that picture, you can see, for example, that the wheels, the pattern on the rubber on the wheels, it's totally clean. That machine has not gone a kilometer on the ground. It's been just put in there, and the pictures were took. So, but otherwise, the question of whether America likes or has authorized the use of these machines on Russian territory is unclear. But we, from yesterday's briefing in the White House, they say we do not encourage this, but they didn't condemn it either. So I don't know. Maybe something changed in the United States, because I know that before Zelensky did promise that the weapons are not going to be used. Maybe weapons were not used, but machinery was allowed for use. I don't know. That remains to be seen, because that story is still unfolding. It is true to say that RDK and Ukraine are acting in accord, because it looks like the intention of the RDK is to create commotion on the border with Ukraine, so that when the counteroffensive starts, much of the army, or at least part of the army in the eastern Ukraine that are holding their positions and trenching in, will be called back to Russia to defend, to try and push out the RDK, the Russian revolutionaries, which will help Ukraine make a swifter advance in Crimea and eastern Ukraine. So even though RDK, you may have heard that they are actually pretty, I think, the radical right, the manifesto that they had produced, I would not agree with that. Like, I would not join just because of that manifesto. But in this case, these are called, this is called like friends, battle friends or something like that, which means that temporarily the goals of Ukrainian armed forces and these groups are the same, so they're working in accord. So that's what's happening. I think what's important and what's helpful when analyzing all of these events is not to look at what happened today and look at it as a snapshot. Look at it as a timeline. What was happening 2 weeks ago, what's happening now, and where it is going. It looks like things are heating up. We're seeing that so the Ukraine is getting more and more capability on striking objects on the Russian territory. We're seeing that Russian revolutionaries are able to stay longer and going deeper into Russian territory. So by many measures, you can say that the offensive of Ukraine had already started, or as Wall Street Journal calls it, the shaping activities for the offensive have already started. So let's keep watching and see what happens, and hopefully this summer will be hot in many respects, and we will be able to get our lawfully internationally recognized territory back to Ukraine, hold our borders, and then use diplomacy or other means to get Putin to back off, sign a peace deal, capitulate, whatever. We just need peace. We need Ukraine to be in its internationally recognized border in one piece, and then we will talk about the economy. All right, thank you, friends. Bye.